Hi everybody, welcome back to another tutorial. My name is Fabian and today we are going to be talking about machine embroidery. Let's go ahead and get into the tools that you're going to need for this tutorial. First and foremost, you're going to need your embroidery hoop. This is the one that came with my BERNINA 790 Plus, and it is the one that I have chosen to work with for this tutorial. Next, you're going to need the appropriate presser foot for the embroidery, and this is what mine looks like. Just make sure you know where yours is and how to install it. You're going to need the thread that you're going to be stitching your design with. This is a rayon thread that I picked up at my local fabric store, and this is some bobbin thread. You are definitely going to want to pick up a spool of this because you do not want to use the same thread on the top that you are using in the bobbin. So this is solely for purposes of bobbin thread. We're not putting this on the top. Also going to need the appropriate spool cap, and you can see here that this one does make sense because it is a smaller end, and again, this also came with my machine, and you want to make sure that you have the correct size, or just make it work with what you've got. Something really important that you're going to need also are sewing machine embroidery needles. I picked this up at my local fabric store. You can get these at your local Joann. They're really easy to find, and this is what I'm going to be putting in my machine for the embroidery. You are also going to need some stabilizer. This is the one that I'm going to be using. It is a sticky tearaway stabilizer. It is by Sulky. There are lots of embroidery stabilizer brands out there. You just kind of want to try different ones and see what works for you. And you are going to need a ruler and some chalk to mark the placement for your embroidery design. We'll get more into that in a second. This chalk in particular actually disappears with the heat of an iron, and it's wax, so you don't really get the chalk residue all over your fingers, which is really nice. Lastly, if you have been following along with my posts, you know that in the last post I showed you how to create this fun rectangle textile design and how to cut it from a pre-existing jacket pattern. So this is my back piece. If you would like to learn how to do the same thing for yourself, go ahead and follow the link that will be in the blog post to read the blog post on how to do this. For this new embroidery tutorial, I am actually going to be embroidering the front of the jacket that goes with this piece. So this is going to be what I'm going to do to the front in essence. So this is my front. So I'm going to show you how to take this game over in my case and place it perfectly and centered on this line here. So what you're going to want to do obviously first is pretty much chose this font in my machine. I typed out the phrase, in my case it's game over, and then I placed the fabric into my hoop and stitched it out as it is, just to kind of see how big it is. I drew myself a center line first, and then I plotted the measurements for both halves of my phrase, just so that I can make sure that it was going to be centered and not off to one side or anything like that. So this is my sample, and I just practiced 4 times and making sure that I knew exactly how this was going to turn out. And one mistake that you don't want to make is assuming that all of your fonts are going to be the same size. I know that's kind of a silly thing, but you can see here that I didn't take this into account because I had been working with another font that was a little bit larger than this, and when I went to place the design, which I'll show you how I did later, it came out with a little space above the line that I wanted it to be on, because what I was going for is this, for game over to be sitting right on my chalk line and not hovering over it like this. From my center line here, I measured 2.5 inches to the left and to the right. And as you can see here, 2.5 inches represents how wide the font is. So that is what I did here. Just took my ruler and measured 2.5 inches to the left of center and 2.5 inches to the right of center, and then just made some lines to indicate where that is. You'll see why this is really helpful once we go to the machine. So let's go ahead and talk about how we prep our hoop for the machine. To figure out which stabilizer you are going to use, stabilizers are not all the same. Some of them have specific uses for specific fabrics, but I find that using a sticky tearaway stabilizer is the next best thing to putting your fabric directly in the hoop. One drawback of putting your fabric directly into the hoop is that you may get what's called a hoop burn, where you can literally see like the outline of where the hoop was directly on your fabric. So this is just a really good tip on how to avoid that. But again, not all fabrics will do this. That's also why you want to go ahead and test this before you do it on your real project. To start, I'm going to open my stabilizer. I am going to take the tape that is on here off. And I am going to loosen the screw that is on my hoop. And you'll notice that when you loosen it, the inside wants to come out. This is perfectly normal. If you've never done this before, there's actually two parts to the hoop. This part goes onto the machine directly into the embroidery module, and this is just the inside. And this just helps to secure your fabric, and once it's inside, you'll just tighten the screw to make it tight and nice and secure. But now what we're going to do is just separate these two. So I'm going to leave this one here and put the other one off to the side. I am going to unroll my stabilizer. And as you can see, it doesn't want to lay flat. So you just want to be careful and lay the embroidery stabilizer over the top of the hoop like I am here. And you'll notice that mine is not quite as tall as my hoop. So what you can do then is turn it this way and hoop it vertically like this. You're gonna hold it down like this. And again, my stabilizer is here and my hoop is here. And you're going to push it down into the other section. And if you need to, you can go and loosen the screw that's underneath here, the one that you use to separate the hoop or to open the hoop. That way you can go ahead and get all of the sections down inside. So this is what it'll look like once you have it secure, and you're just going to go and tighten the screw underneath that I showed you just a second ago. And you just want to tighten it and make sure that it is secure to start. And then once you do that, take a pair of scissors, cut the stabilizer down a little bit longer than your hoop. And this is what it'll look like once your stabilizer is in the hoop. This is what you need to do to get the stabilizer in the hoop. For other stabilizers, such as a regular tearaway or a wash away, you're going to put the fabric directly into the hoop. So you'll have fabric on top of this and not just the stabilizer. So the last thing that we need to do is we need to score this stabilizer, so that way once it's time to put the fabric on, we just have to peel it off and set the fabric on, and the sticky will activate and keep it held in place. So what you can do to score the stabilizer is to use a scissor. You can use the tip of your scissor, a pin, or in my case, I'm going to use the tip of these tweezers to just make a little tear. So that way I have something to grab onto when it's time to pull this back. So you can see here there's a little piece that I can rip off here. And you just want to make sure that it's big enough for you to see and for you to be able to grab it and pull it back. This little tear right here is what will let me grab onto it to tear the paper off. So that way the sticky part becomes exposed. Alrighty, now we are here at the sewing machine and we are going to get ready to embroider. So I'll go ahead and walk you through the setup if you've never done this before. So first thing is you are going to take your bobbin thread, your spool of bobbin thread, and you're going to wind bobbin like so. And you should already be familiar with how to wind a bobbin on your machine. Once you do that, you are going to thread it into the bobbin case and then insert it into the machine. You'll just put the bobbin into the bobbin case like so, making sure that you have a good size string of thread here. You're going to insert it into the machine. Keep a long tail, close the door, and trim it off and discard the tail. You are going to take the thread that you're going to be stitching the embroidery design with. In my case, this is my pink rayon thread. I am going to release the thread tail, pop it back into place, and put this on my machine with the appropriate spool. I've already inserted the embroidery needle into the machine, and again, I am using a size 14 embroidery Smets needle. Once you have done that, you're going to go ahead and switch out your presser foot for the embroidery foot. This is what mine looks like. You should already be familiar with how to change the presser feet on your sewing machine, like so. And again, this is the foot that we always embroider with. Now, we need to go ahead and switch our needle. Grab yours, and if you don't know what that looks like, this is what it looks like. To insert the new plate, all you have to do is position the plate. So you'll replace that plate. And then what we are going to do is we are going to switch our machine to embroidery. Now I have already attached my embroidery module, which is right here on the side. It just goes plugged into the side of the sewing machine, and then it lets you toggle between the embroidery machine and the sewing machine. And fun fact, you can actually sew with your embroidery arm still attached. One other thing that you can do too is if you have the extension table that came with your machine, you can also embroider with this on the machine. I highly recommend doing this because this just gives you way more space to work with, and it just makes for better results, honestly. So yeah, you can use this big space in conjunction with your embroidery module and still sew with it on, and it'll be fine. To tell the machine that we want to embroider, so you're going to come over to the side and tap the picture of the home. You'll get two options. You're going to tap the right option, and you'll see a little message that comes up that's telling me that I need to disengage my feed dogs. So you're going to come to the side of the machine and do that. And then once you do that, your new embroidery menu will come up. So after you drop your feed dogs, this is the new menu that will pop up. From this screen, you're going to choose the design that you want to work with. In my case, I'm stitching out a font, so I'm going to go over to the folder that has the letters, or the ABC, and touch that. This will give you 3 menus worth of alphabets and fonts that you can choose from. So that's the first page, this is the second page, and the third page. My font happens to be on the third page, which is number 21, so I'm going to touch that. Next, so I am going to stitch out my phrase, which is game over, so I want to do capital G. And then if you want lowercase, you're going to touch the lowercase option and then finish typing out game. And then this button is the space. I'm going to do capital O VER, game over. So with that, I'm happy with how this looks. I'm going to tap the green check mark. And next it will give you the embroidery field screen. So just a little bit about this screen. This is the screen that your design is going to appear on. This is the screen where you're going to edit the size of the design, where you want to place it, and so on. Another very important part of this particular screen is the left-hand side. So in particular, you're going to notice the picture of the presser foot. You're going to tap the picture of the presser foot. You're going to choose number 26. And this is the embroidery foot, and then you're going to X out of that menu. You're going to come down to the picture of the hoop and tap that. This is what will let you choose the hoop that you are working with. I need to find my oval hoop, which is right here. I'm going to touch that and then exit out. And just a little thing is, since I changed my hoop, you'll see that my design is hanging over quite a bit, and that the outside of my hoop is highlighted in red. We will go over how to correct this in a second. Next, what we're going to do is touch the picture of the stitch plate and where it says 9mm, and we're going to tell the machine that we are working with our 0mm plate, and you want to make sure that it's the 0mm plate and not the 0mm cut plate. Just keep that in mind. You want to choose the 0mm, and then X out of that screen. And now we can go ahead and start manipulating our design to get it ready for our fabric and to stitch. The first thing that I'm going to do to begin downsizing this design is to tap the information button, or the I, and then I'm going to choose the second option on the left column like this, And this will let you downsize the design so that way we can get it to fit inside of our hoop. So I'm going to take my dial and go and make it smaller like so. And you can see now that it's pretty much inside of our hoop and it's not outlined in red anymore. So we'll go ahead and you can X out of that screen, and this is what it will look like. You'll notice that there's a little crosshair in the corner where the G is. Just so you know, that means that that is where the machine is going to start stitching this particular design or this. Finish getting this ready for our fabric, we're going to need to grab our hoop and our fabric piece. So what we're going to do now is open up the menu for Pinpoint Placement. So I'm going to go to the information button again. I'm going to touch this up. So once you tap that picture, you're going to hear the embroidery arm calibrate. It's going to move over closer to your machine, and this pop-up message is going to come up. This is telling you that the machine needs the hoop to be placed into the module. Putting the embroidery hoop into the module is pretty simple. All you have to do is find the springs on the side of the hoop. This part is what is going to get latched onto the embroidery module. And if you turn the hoop to its side, you'll see that there's a space here and a space here. And when you squeeze those spring sections together, it's going to open them up so that way you can place them inside here and here. And this is what will secure it to the machine. So I'm going to slide it down and under the needle and press. And I'm going to, with my left hand, squeeze the springs open. I am going to set it down and release. And that is what will hook this hoop onto the machine. Now what we're going to do is we're going to prep our fabric to be placed inside of the hoop. Now, if you remember before, we made a little rip or a score into the stabilizer so that way we can peel back the paper and reveal the sticky, so that way we don't have to put the fabric directly into the hoop. And you can see I'm just carefully tearing off the paper, and you want to continue doing this until you have the good majority of your hoop exposed. Piece that I just ripped off, you can see it's sticky here, right? You want to go up to but not past the hoop, just because you don't want to risk your hoop getting sticky and then having to deal with that mess. So with that, you'll discard the extra paper, and you can see I still have a little bit left to deal with here. So you just want to tear that off. So you want to take off the paper and most of the inside of the hoop, if that makes sense, because although we're only stitching in one section of the hoop, we still need the rest of the space to be able to give our fabric some traction so it doesn't end up moving and distorting our design. So we'll go ahead and grab the actual fabric that we're going to be using, and if you have a long tail of thread like I have here, you can just kind of wrap it up and around the machine so it's not in the way. Just to recap, this is the right side of our fabric, and we're going to be placing the design on this line, or in my case my phrase is going on this line, and we're going to use these 3 points for our pinpoint placement to give us the correct place to stitch out. So I'm going to put my fabric onto the hoop, and this might take a second, but you just want to place it, you know, pretty well inside, like so. And once you have it inside, you also want to make sure that you don't get up inside like the edges of the hoop. So where my finger is here, this is the hoop, and then on this side, this is where the hoop is. You want to make sure that you have a little bit of a space between my chalk lines and the edge of my hoop. So, and you want to just finger press everything down, and since this is sticky, it's gonna just make things much easier, and you don't have to deal with hooping or doing a basting stitch around the design. It just makes your life a lot easier. Another thing too is you don't want to thread your needle quite yet. You'll see why in a second, because we're actually going to be dropping our needle down into these areas to tell the machine where to place it. So let's go ahead and do that now. Now we are going to use pinpoint placement on the BERNINA 790 Plus to line up our design on the line and make sure that it gets stitched out in just the right spot where we want it. The first thing I'm going to do is come up to the information button and touch that. I'm going to open up the pinpoint placement menu, which is the second column, second option. I'm going to touch that and you'll see that a new screen comes up and you have all of these points that are plotted throughout the design on screen. What we're going to do is we're going to use the bottom 3 points to line it up onto our fabric so that way we can stitch it on the line. So I'm going to use my dials and start positioning the point underneath the needle, which is our center point again. And when you think you have it, you can use your hand wheel very carefully and just lower the needle, not all the way into the fabric, but just so where you can see if it's going to make it into the correct point or not. So in this case, if you look down here at my fabric, the needle should be where the center mark is, and as you can see, it's not quite there. So I need to move my fabric over again until that point is met. And as you can see now, when I lower my needle, the needle is right in the center point or where the crosshairs intersect. I'm going to go ahead and take my stylus and come over to the button on the bottom right hand corner that says set. I'm going to touch that, and that's going to tell the machine that this is the center point for this design. I'm going to move over to the next point, which is the farthest to the right, and I'm going to lower my needle and repeat the same process and make sure that that needle is landing right where that point is. Once you have the position correct on the outwardmost point, like I have here, and you'll see that when I lower my needle, it's touching that farthest end point on the right hand side. Push set, and I'm going to move over to the farthest left point and repeat the process again. I'm going to push the set button again, and at this point we can go ahead and exit out of the pinpoint placement. You're going to go to the picture of the needle here with the 3 dots next to it, touch that, and what happens now is your machine moves over to the starting point of where it's going to start stitching the design out. And at this point, you've already told your machine where the points are that need to line up in order for this to be in the correct spot. So now we're ready to stitch out our design. The first thing we're going to do is thread our needle, and you are going to then push the green button until the machine starts to stitch. After the machine makes a few stitches, you're going to push the button again and stop it, and we're going to trim the thread away. You want to start with a fairly long tail like I have here, and this just makes it so that you don't get, a jam or any missed stitches. So what we're going to do now is hold the thread with our left hand, and I'm going to push down on the button, and you'll see that the machine will start stitching. And after a few stitches, you want to stop it. And I have some bent scissors here. I'm just going to slip it inside and cut the thread off, making sure I don't poke a hole in my project. I'm going to push the button again, and it's going to start. Let it stitch until it is finished, and then we'll come back and go over what happened. All right, so once the machine is done stitching the design, this is what the screen will look like, and the machine will just kind of come to a halt. You're just going to push the little icon of the flag, and then it'll pretty much reset you to where it would start to stitch the design again if you were going to do it again. But since we are finished, we're going to go ahead and take this opportunity to remove the hoop. So I'm going to do the reverse of what we did to put it on. I'm going to squeeze the spring to release it, and then pull up, and then pull the hoop out. And as you can see, this is what the design will look like after it is finished. So we'll go ahead and take this back to our table to remove the stabilizer and show how we wrap this up. So once you are done stitching out the design, this is what you will have. You'll pretty much still have a hooped piece of fabric with the design stitched inside of the hoop. And now we are going to remove the hoop and remove the stable. I'm going to go ahead and remove the hoop. First and foremost, I'm going to lift the rest of my fabric out, find the screw, and start unscrewing the hoop, just enough to where I can take out the work. So I'm going to lift the hoop out from the inside, and I am going to just remove my work like so. And then I will take the stabilizer on the back of it and start ripping it away. You want to unstick the parts of your fabric that don't need to be stuck onto it anymore, and just start gently tearing it off of the fabric. You want to make sure that you're doing this as carefully as possible, because you can rip stitches out and distort the design a little. So just work carefully and take your time. There's no rush. You'll do this until the whole thing is ripped out, and when it is, you can go ahead and discard this, and this is what we are left with. I'm going to take this over to my pressing table and just give it a good press with no steam. Went ahead and gave this a good press with just a hot iron and a press cloth. Now you can see that my chalk marks have disappeared and there's no trace of me marking the placement of this design. And with that, that completes this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.